Taiwan, a country I'm proud to say I'm from. In my career as a media entrepreneur, I've spoken to movers and shakers here who make global headlines. But what I'm most excited about are the up-and-coming forces of my generation. They're young, they're creative, they dare to defy the status quo. Follow me as I meet emerging leaders of Taiwan who lift us, who inspire us, who are changing the world, starting in Taiwan. This is Game Changers with Emily Wiley. Our game changer today, TONY LAU KWONG SHING, he's a comic artist from Hong Kong. He rose to international recognition when he participated at the French Angoulême International Comic Festival in 2017. But it was 2 years later, during the Hong Kong protest of 2019, that shaped his work as we know it today. Since then, Tony has been documenting the stories of his city, Hong Kong. In 2020, Tony published his book, The Fallen City. It was a collection of sketches and scenes from the 2019 pro-democracy protests. That was the same month that China imposed its national security law on Hong Kong. Today, Tony is among the many Hong Kongers that have found refuge abroad. Tony now lives in Taiwan. He's held solo exhibitions, and he works regularly with publishers here, lending his art to tell the stories of others. Stories of oppression, stories of injustice. Let's meet our game changer today, TONY LAU KWONG SHING. Hey!
Hey.
Welcome!
Thank you.
For the last 2 years that you've been living in Taiwan, your name has been popping up all around town in exhibitions, at book fairs, and multiple books that have been published. I want to bring us back to 2019. So 2019 was the year that everything changed in Hong Kong. And in the summer of 2019, you were among the million Hong Kongers who took to the streets. And it was after this that your art became political art.
Yeah.
What did you see on the street that changed you?
I think that it's not my first time from 2019 that I start to be on the street. As I remember, it's already around 10 years, which I already protest around on the streets. But I start to feel quite powerless because when I protest on the streets for over 10 years, I start to realize that the government didn't really care about us because they are responsible for Beijing but not responsible for citizens. So no matter how many people joining the protest, they just don't really change anything. So when I realized that, I think that maybe I can do one more step further, which is make use of my own profession, which is drawing, to maybe document what's happening on the streets. Because at that time, the mainstream broadcast platforms are pretty obvious that they are all pro-Beijing. So they, as I know, their news are pretty biased, in my opinion. So I think not just me, it's a lot of group of people which from different professions, like some are directors, some are artists. Yeah, so we start to, it's pretty lucky that it's an era of social media, so we can start to build up our own way to share what's actually happening in Hong Kong, instead of relying on those mainstream broadcast platforms.
Right.
Yeah, so we start to create our own things. I start to draw a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I start to turn my art into political, much more political way.
So the changes in Hong Kong, really, as you said, has been happening for a whole decade.
Yeah.
Starting with 2012 with the anti-national curriculum that the government was trying to impose on the students, and students rose up, spoke back. And then following that, the umbrella movement of 2014, and then 5 years later, 2019, the pro-democracy movements. So in 2020, finally, Beijing implemented the national security law, which legitimized its jailing of pro-democracy activists.
Yeah.
And so it was that same year, that same month actually, you published your book. It's called The Fallen City, Hong Kong. But in Cantonese and Mandarin, the book title actually means the city that got disappeared,
Yeah.
which is a reference to how Beijing takes and disappears, detains pro-democracy voices. What about Hong Kong that was disappeared?
There are lots of things which disappeared over decades. For example, of course, the freedom of speech, it is gradually disappearing. Like, I forgot the actual year, but there was a bookshop in Causeway Bay, which is called Causeway Bay Book, and the booksellers are being sent to mainland China without being informed, which means our safety is not guaranteed. We might be arrested whenever they want. So we start to realize the situation is becoming much more severe from that incident. And also, as you said, the national curriculum, that really changed a lot of content in a textbook, and which I'm pretty shocked that they are trying to change the content, that they no longer emphasize the importance of media or importance of freedom of speech or importance of human rights. So, which means the new generation students might not aware of their own human rights or the way actually the media might be able to monitor the government. So their value might be quite different with us, because we are educated to be having strong critical thinking and respect each others, and also about human rights and so on. And also we were looking forward for promise from Beijing to become true, which is a universal suffrage, but over decades it didn't really come true, and also our rights of election is also being prohibited.
So is the disappearance of freedom of speech, disappearance of the identity and the culture of Hong Kong. And so in your book, the 2020 book, it was a collection of scenes from the 2019 protests. When you published it, you actually published that in Taiwan, because at the time it was no longer safe to publish the book in Hong Kong. And a year later, you moved to Taiwan, out of Hong Kong. What did you bring with you?
I bring almost everything with me, and especially books, because when I was young, I moved from Japan to China, and at that moment, my mom didn't really bring any of my books with me, which is pretty sad for me. So this time, no matter how heavy those books are, I still bring along with me.
How many books?
As I remember, there are 50 packs of
50 boxes.
Boxes,
That's got to be about more than 600 books. You brought it all over to Taiwan. Do you think you'll ever go back to Hong Kong again?
I don't think so.
Since moving here, you've been working with a lot of publishers here. You're still telling the story of Hong Kong, but you're also lending your expertise as an illustrator to help tell the stories of others. There's a book on the recent political uprising in Myanmar. There was another book on labor abuses in Taiwan. Why is it important that you are doing this work? What does it mean for you to be helping others to tell their stories?
I think that first of all, these projects are not initiated by me, but I feel like people still strongly believe that I'm willing to bring some voice out for this group of people. So I will not really reject those requests, because I think that it is really, there must be someone to draw these kind of things and to raise some awareness of people. For the Myanmar one, because I think that there are lots of countries that we don't really pay enough attention. For example, we are pretty lucky that, for example, in Taiwan or Hong Kong, everything happened in these places might still be an international news. For Myanmar, even if the situation is pretty severe, but after the civil war starts, I think that people start to put a blind eye on them because it's just keep going on, but people might feel tired, but it is still happening, and people in Myanmar is still suffering. Yeah, and also this book is trying to raise more attention that there are a lot of countries in some sort of corners. There are really a lot of things happening on them. And the reason why I have to raise the attention of people to look at those countries is because I think it is a global phenomenon that democratic movement is happening overseas, and we have to really support these different countries because we all share same universal value, which is we want to fight for human rights, really basic democracy, and also to let people like in Taiwan to realize that the freedom is not free. We have to embrace our freedom we are having right now. If we have extra timing or resources, we might still try to help them. Or if you are not able to, then at least I really hope people can really realize that the freedom is not taken for granted. Yeah.
That freedom is hard-earned, and it takes a lot of effort to uphold freedom and our democracy. You're in a genre that's very popular now all around the world, not just in protest art, but also in just general nonfiction and fiction. There's a resurgence of graphic novels. But also what graphic novel does really well that other genres, other mediums could not deliver is that you're able to put us, the readers, into the minds of the characters, right? With the lines you draw, the shading, you can communicate that emotion in a way that's not possible. And I think for journalists who are covering stories of Hong Kong, of Xinjiang, of the Uyghurs, it can be very taxing to hear and report on these stories day in and day out. You're somebody who's living through this experience in Hong Kong, and now you're drawing the emotional experience of others. Does that ever get too heavy for you?
Sometimes it is, yeah, because I don't just only draw political stuff. I also draw some other kind of stuff, but maybe the exposure isn't strong enough when comparing with these politically
So you
related.
keep a good balance that way?
Yeah, I'm trying to balance my own mentally, because if I keep on drawing these pretty heavy issues for me, then I will be pretty depressed. But I still have to find other ways. Maybe some are other freelancers, or some are just for my own, just for fun to draw.
Do you go out, take a break to go out, or you just make sure that you have other works coming in as well?
Make sure that I have other works, and also I have some free time to draw something I enjoy to draw.
Before you started drawing protest art, you were working on sci-fi.
Oh, yeah.
This has been a really rare chance to hear from you directly. The work you do, not just telling the stories of Hong Kong, but helping others is so important. Let's take a break. Hey, welcome back to Game Changers with Emily Y. Wu. This is where I sit down with really important people doing impactful work in the world. We've been sitting here today with Tony, who's a comic artist from Hong Kong. Even though Tony is known for his political art, recently he's been lending his expertise to help others to tell their stories. What about your other friends in the creative industry? Writers, other illustrators, film directors, documentarians. What's the sense, how many of them have stayed in Hong Kong?
I think it's about 50-50 because as I know, a lot of people moved to Taiwan or UK or Australia, but as I know, most of this group of people, including artists or documentarians, are based in Taiwan now.
Just in the past year, the number of independent bookstores and publishers that have opened by the new Hong Kong diaspora is quite a number.
Yeah.
And you obviously are a name that gets mentioned a lot within this context of Hong Kong culture and makers who are now in the world. For the ones who have stayed in Hong Kong, what is their work like now under national security law?
I think they are still creating something, but they have to be really careful that even if they are not aware of criticizing the government, but if your content is somehow sensitive for government in some cases, then at least you won't be arrested, but you might be in some sort of trouble, which means your works might not be able to publish or screened.
Do you self-censor? Do you find yourself in situations where you still have to think about the impact national security law might have on you, even though you're not in Hong Kong anymore?
I think that I still have some sort of self-censorship because my mom and dad are still in Hong Kong and I don't really want them in trouble. So I don't really fully censor myself. I just make sure I'm not that super active to be considered as a dangerous figure for the government. So I still keep mentioning some issues, but not really that frequent as how I did before. Yeah.
And I want to dig a bit more even on this creative community. I think art, writing, all the creative work, we bear witness to history. What do you see as the role of Hong Kong creatives now in the world, in Hong Kong? Some are still in Hong Kong, in the UK, in Canada, in the US, and Taiwan. What is the role of artists, writers today in telling the story?
I think that first of all, we all have to be down to earth, that if we are living in other places, we have to make a first step, which is to show people that we are willing to start up a new life in new places, to build up a new lifestyle, which means we are willing to learn from the new place, how people spend their time or how people speak. For example, I came to Taiwan and I tried my best to learn Mandarin as soon as possible so I can really start to communicate with people. Otherwise, if you are not trying hard to let people know that you are paying much time and effort to build up a new life in a new place, they might not be interested to listen to whatever you say. So we have to make sure that we show our respect to the different places, so we can start up to talk about Hong Kong. And also I think that when we are trying to talk about Hong Kong, it shouldn't be just like sharing sad stories, but also sharing in a much more wide range of ways, because I think that not everyone is willing to keep listening to others sharing about a lot of sad stories. Yeah, so I think much more important thing is to let other people know that the diversity of Hong Kong people, which is not shaped by the media, and also we actually have our own culture, or we are human beings and we have our own characters, instead of just only sharing about a lot of sad incidents happened in Hong Kong.
How do you balance that, the happiness and the sadness of Hong Kong?
I just treat people as regular friends. Just share whatever I want, like how I studied in Hong Kong, the education system in Hong Kong, and what's the difference between Hong Kong and Taiwan, to build interest of others to really start to get to know about Hong Kong.
I think it's quite incredible too, because I think Having heard stories of the newly exiled, you hear of the emotional toll. And I think in Taiwan there is a community of Hong Kongers, and it is nice to see. And other times, I'm sure some of your friends are in a bit more isolated areas in the world. But what I really admire about you is that you, in addition to continue to tell the stories of Hong Kong, you are helping others to tell their stories with such a powerful tool, which is your pen, your pencil, your ability to draw, your ability to tell stories in such a effective way to show those emotions, to storytell. I admire that so much. And before we let you go, there is a question that we asked everybody here, which is, you know, out of your accomplishments so far, out of what you've been able to do, how much was given to you versus how much did you have to fight for?
I think that not really many people make use of pencil to draw a finished artwork. And also I think that I'm still looking for a lot of originality, which is trying to find my own path and explore further, which means I will keep using the pencil and also the way I draw comics, like the way I choose an angle to draw a panel is pretty unusual, I believe, yeah. Of course, I take a lot of references, but I still make sure that I digest a lot and convert them into my own stuff, and which I believe that even without mentioning my name, if you randomly spot an artwork drawn by me, I'm pretty sure that it is able to be recognized that this is my work.
Yes, it's very unique, has its own signature and style for sure. What can we look forward to for your work this year?
This year, an animation of a documentary. Yeah, it is just part of the documentary because the documentary is around 100 minutes and my part is just around 25 minutes. Yeah, I will have to draw a lot of animation, which because the documentary is about some of the refugees from Hong Kong who are living in overseas right now. They are willing to be an interviewee. Yeah, and some of the images just couldn't be recorded. Yeah, so I have to draw them into animation. Yeah, and also some other adaptation from novel into comics.
Oh, exciting!
Yeah.
I definitely look forward to it. And best of luck.
Thank you.
This is Tony. Tony's been documenting the swift changes of his city, Hong Kong, and now lending his art to others so that more can tell their stories. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have. Please do look up Tony if you're also an artist who works in protest art, but also look up more of Tony's work that are not always politically related. My name is Emily Y. Wu, and you've been watching Game Changers. This is TaiwanPlus. Do follow and subscribe to TaiwanPlus on all social media channels. We'll see you next time.